Greetings and welcome. You are tuned into TMH Daily English News. The headlines for today: U.S. Special Envoy David Satterfield is currently in Ethiopia holding talks with the government, the AU, as well as the UN. UK minister says humanitarian response in Tigray now at a complete standstill owing to the Ethiopian government's current blockade. And Bloomberg article says outsiders' attempt to mediate the Tigray conflict has failed. As we move on to the main stories for today, the U.S. Department of State disclosed that the U.S. Special Envoy David Satterfield is in Ethiopia currently. According to the U.S. Department of State, Satterfield is currently in Ethiopia holding talks with the government along with the officials from the United Nations, African Union, and the State Department, said in a press release that it released today. The special envoy today met with AU High Representative for the Horn of Africa, Olusegun Obasanjo, and AU Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Bankole Adeoye, to discuss engagement on the regional affairs, including Sudan and Ethiopia. According to the press release of the State Department, the special envoy was also due to meet with the representatives of humanitarian organizations. UK minister tells Parliament that the humanitarian response in Tigray is now at a complete standstill owing to the Ethiopian government's blockade. Answering a question submitted in writing by a parliamentary member, Lord Goldsmith, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Minister said the conflict is causing appalling suffering to the civilian and its population. He said over 400,000 people in Tigray are now currently living in famine-like conditions, and almost 30 million are in need of urgent humanitarian assistance across the entire country. Lord Goldsmith noted that the humanitarian response in Tigray is now at a complete standstill, again owing to the de facto blockade that's ongoing on the region imposed by the government of Ethiopia since July of 2021. He said his government is working with its international partners and humanitarian agencies so that the relief can be delivered to Tigray as quickly as possible in the event that the access is granted or when there is an easing of the blockade. UK funding to the crisis in northern Ethiopia has included support to help strengthen the humanitarian logistics, improve the security of the response, and augment civil-military coordination. The minister said all parties to the conflict in the north must agree to the ceasefire and allow aid to reach the people that are currently in dire need. The GSTS, Society of Tigray Scholars and Professionals, condemned the threats made against the Ethiopian Patriarchy and called for the immediate intervention by the religious leaders of the whole world. GSTS wrote an appeal to the religious leaders across the world to bring their attention the grave threat by the Ethiopian government against His Holiness Abuna Matthias, the first Patriarch of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. GSTS strongly condemned the threats made against His Holiness by Daniel Kibret, special advisor to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, on his recent appearance on the Ethiopian satellite television. The threats came after an interview by His Holiness in which he condemned the gruesome killings of Tigrayans who were burned alive in Benishangul Gumuz region of Ethiopia by the Ethiopian and Amhara regional state security forces. His Holiness also mourned the ongoing genocide against Tigrayans by the combined forces of Eritrean and Ethiopian armies and the Amhara Special Forces, as well as the militia, and expressed his sadness on the tragic state of Ethiopia currently. He spoke against the war and the heinous atrocities committed in Ethiopia and his role as religious father and spiritual guide as consistent with his principled approach against the atrocities wherever, by whomever are committed. GSTS noted that both ESAT and Daniel Kibret are major actors of the genocidal regime of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, and they said that ESAT is the Amhara extremist version of the infamous Interhabme Hutu extremist radio, also known as RTLM, known for making a call to drain the sea, quote-unquote, in a bid to incite violence against the Tigrayan ethnic minority. Daniel Kibret acts like the Nazi propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, as chief advisor of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, as GSTS said, adding that he has appeared on other media outlets to disseminate hate rhetoric and incite to violence by the Ethiopian regime to call for the exterminations of all Tigrayans. The U.S. government recently strongly condemned Daniel for his dangerous, hateful rhetoric. It is said to be recalled that His Holiness, Abuna Matthias, many attempts to speak out against the genocidal war on Tigray have been thwarted. According to GSTS, His Holiness has lost his personal freedom, and more importantly, his devout followers have been denied his spiritual guidance. His right to liberty and security is breached. His life is in real and imminent danger from the state security apprentice. The statement stressed and added that the Ethiopian government is not only interfering in the affairs of the Ethiopian faith, but also persecuting their leaders in blatant violation of the separation of state and religion. GSTS appealed to the religious leaders to condemn the threat on His Holiness Abuna Matthias and the leaders of other faiths in Ethiopia, and called on the government of Ethiopia to ensure his security and freedom to discharge his responsibilities. They further appealed to the religious leaders and the international community to heed the calls of His Holiness Abuna Matthias and openly condemn the currently ongoing genocide against Tigrayans. UNHCSR faces a funding shortfall to meet the needs of refugees and IDPs in Ethiopia. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee, again also known as UNHCSR, said it only received 13% of the $205.4 million US it wants to meet the needs for internally displaced persons and refugees within Ethiopia. In its latest Northern Ethiopia emergency update, the report said it has received only $25.9 million out of the $205 US it wants to meet the needs of 93,500 refugees and asylum seekers in Ethiopia, as well as 2.6 million IDPs. The funds are needed to meet the shelter, education, and health, as well as water and sanitation needs of all refugees and IDPs in Ethiopia, as the UNHCR disclosed. Bloomberg says outsiders' attempt to mediate the Tigray conflict has failed to no avail so far. This is in an article written by Bobby Gosh by Bloomberg, titled "The World's Deadliest War Isn't in Ukraine, but it is in Ethiopia." Coming from a Nobel Peace Prize winner, Abiy Ahmed calls for the restraint and the diplomacy to end the war in Ukraine might have attracted more attention if the Ethiopian Prime Minister hadn't stained his laurels with the blood of his own people. Reports of hideous war crimes committed by his forces and those of his Eritrean allies against civilians in the northern province of Tigray make a mockery of his appeals for the nonviolence in other parts of the world. Russia's invasion of Ukraine currently has diverted international attention from conflicts elsewhere, including those in Yemen, Mozambique, and Africa, Sahel, the region that's the south of the Sahara, and Ethiopia, as well as Africa's second most populous nation, a bloody civil war, which is war-torn now for 16 months. Caught in the middle are civilians in the northern province who now face a calamity that is being likened to the horrors of Africa and Ethiopia's past. Mass starvation, ethnogenocide. World Health Organization also said Director General Tedros Adhanom, himself an Ethiopian, says there is nowhere on earth where the health of millions of people is more under threat than the Tigray region currently. Abiy's government, which has celebrated Tedros' elevation to the leadership of the WHO as a matter of national pride, now is trying to tar his name and his status because his family and his origins is Tigray. But as well as anecdotal evidence, there is a growing body of data to support Tedros' claim that the province is on the edge of an extreme major humanitarian catastrophe as well as disaster. Though the war's true toll is impossible to know, the researchers from Belgium's Ghent University have estimated as many as 500,000 people have died so far, between 50,000 to 100,000 from the fighting alone, 150,000 to 200,000 from starvation, and more than 100,000 from the lack of medical attention. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has expressed concern about possible ethnic cleansing in Tigray, but the government in Addis Ababa has dismissed this as complete spurious. Abiy's soldiers are blamed for most of the civilian casualties, especially those from starvation and neglect. Government forces are preventing food, aid, as well as medicine from reaching Tigray. Humanitarian groups say that there are no slouches at other kinds of atrocities, including the recent immolation of Tigrayan men, which even the government-affiliated Human Rights Commission has blamed on Abiy Ahmed's forces. Such outrageous claims are likely to multiply and escalate as the war remains stalemated. While his ground forces seem to have stopped short of an assault on Tigray, where the mountainous terrain has previously proved to be a distinct Tigray forces' advantage, Abiy has no qualms about ordering airstrikes that have inflicted heavy civilian casualties, as Michelle Bachelet, head of the UN Human Rights Commission, says her staff and have recommended hundreds of deaths from aerial attacks apparently carried out by the Ethiopian Air Force. The government has completely denied all of these claims. Abiy and the Tigray leadership have both said that they are willing to negotiate an end to the civil war, but neither side has demonstrated much flexibility on their demands, and the Prime Minister wants the Tigray forces to disarm and accept rule from Addis Ababa, while Tigrayans want greater autonomy for the Tigray and an accounting for the atrocities committed by the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. There is a little prospect of progress toward reconciliation or even peace without more outside pressure, but with the world's attention currently focused on Ukraine and Russia's conflict, there's little chance that both sides in the Ethiopian civil war will use the stalemate to rearm for more fighting as well. Council of Ministers approved bill on Ethiopia-Turkey military cooperation, including joint military exercises. The Council of Ministers, in its 5th regular meeting held that last Saturday, approved the draft bill on military cooperations agreements with the Republic of Turkey, including agreements on joint military exercises, as well as anti-piracy collaboration. The bill was subsequently sent to the House of People's Representatives for the view and review of approval. Turkey has been one of the key supporters of Abiy Ahmed's regime in its genocidal campaign in Tigray, and thus this bill has in fact been approved. As we move on to the final story for today, the Ethiopian government has decided to relocate sets of learning equipment purchased for Tigray by development organizations. Sources said that 10 million euros worth sets of equipment that were stored in Addis Ababa are currently being moved from Addis Ababa to Kombolcha either tomorrow or the day after. Observers noted that this commandering is illegal and is being spearheaded by the Minister of Labor and Skills Development, Moferiat Kamil. The equipment was supposed to play a key role in the teaching and learning process of colleges in Ma'ala, Wuqro, and Shura and Dasilasa. This move is a continuation of Abiy Ahmed's regime's deliberate policy of depriving Tigrayans the right to education by destroying, looting educational institutions in the entirety of Tigray. That wraps up our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll have some more for you tomorrow. Bye-bye.